He had no legs, no right hand, and, it turned out, no intention of keeping the one promise that made him millions. This is the story of how a decorated war hero got hundreds of thousands of ordinary Americans to fund Donald Trump's border wall themselves. His name was Brian Kolfage, and the pitch was almost impossible to argue with, everyday citizens pooling their cash to do what a gridlocked Congress wouldn't. To prove his heart was in it, he swore he'd take not a single penny for himself. Every dollar he promised would go into the wall. They believed him. They gave him around $25 million, and they got just under 5 miles of fence. So where did the rest go? The answer runs through shell companies, fake invoices, a former White House strategist, and a boat Kolfage bought with the money, and then posted proudly on Instagram. Welcome to Malignant Design. Today, we are diving into the real story of Trump's wall and how it turned into one of the biggest scams on the American people in history. To understand how 250,000 people came to trust Brian Kolfage with their money, you first have to understand why that trust felt so safe, and that takes us more than 20 years back. September 11th, 2004, exactly 3 years after America had been attacked. At the Balad Air Base in Iraq, a 107mm rocket comes down roughly 3 feet from where a 23-year-old airman, Brian Kolfage, is standing. In an instant, everything changed. The blast took both of his legs and his right hand. What came next was a fight just to keep him breathing. Hours of surgery, multiple blood transfusions, and more than a dozen operations. An airman who takes a rocket at 3 feet does not usually survive. Kolfage did. He came home as one of the most severely wounded US service members ever to survive his injuries. He was awarded the Purple Heart, an award given for extreme sacrifice. But then came the harder part, learning to live without both legs and his dominant hand, trying to rebuild a life from a hospital bed. To the people who later heard his story, that meant everything. When Brian Kolfage spoke about loving his country, nobody asked him to prove it. He had put his body on the line and only narrowly kept it. However, heroism doesn't come with a paycheck. That's why, in the years after Iraq, Kolfage reinvented himself online. He built a following in right-wing media, running Facebook pages like Right Wing News and affiliate sites such as Freedom Daily. These outlets frequently trafficked in conspiracy theories, but they brought in money, and Kolfage was slowly becoming a public figure. In late 2018, Facebook wiped out more than 500 pages similar to these, including Kolfage's. The reason given was using fake accounts to drive traffic to their websites. When he launched a new campaign weeks later, he would leave all of that out. He later admitted he did it on purpose because he didn't want it to be a distraction. It was the first small lie, and it wouldn't be the last. In December 2018, he found the cause that would make him rich. The country was tearing itself apart over a single issue: Donald Trump's promised wall along the southern border. Trump had campaigned on it relentlessly, but Congress refused to fully fund it, and the standoff was about to trigger the longest government shutdown in American history. To one side, the wall was national security. To the other, a monument to cruelty. There was no middle ground. And where there is that much passion, there is that much money waiting to be tapped. So Kolfage launched a GoFundMe with a title built for the moment: "We the People Will Build the Wall." His stated goal was a staggering $1 billion, and his rallying cry was pure math. If the 63 million people who voted for Trump each chipped in around $80, they could do for themselves what their government wouldn't. It was a wildly unrealistic number. It caught fire anyway, pulling in about $17 million in a single week. Why did it work when countless online fundraisers die in obscurity? Because Kolfage wasn't really selling a wall. He was selling a feeling, the sense of finally doing something at a moment when millions felt powerless. Take Nicole Keller, a school teacher from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, who gave a modest donation because she believed in the cause. Multiply her by 250,000. Every donation was a vote, a middle finger to Washington, a badge of belonging. Even Donald Trump cheered it on, calling it private enterprise at its finest: better, faster, cheaper. But almost as fast as the money arrived, a problem surfaced, one that threatened to kill the entire project before a single foot of wall was built. GoFundMe had a rule, and that rule meant Brian Kolfage legally could not do the one thing he'd just promised hundreds of thousands of donors he would do. So what was it? And who did Kolfage bring in to get around it? a man whose name would soon drag this scandal onto every front page in America. Almost overnight, the $20 million Brian Kolfage had raised was about to vanish. Not stolen, not spent, refunded, every last dollar handed straight back to the people who gave it. Kolfage had promised that every cent would go directly to the US government to build the wall. The trouble is, the government has no mechanism to accept $20 million from a stranger's online fundraiser and start pouring concrete. GoFundMe agreed, and in January 2019, it ruled the money had to be returned unless each donor actively opted in to redirect it. For most people, that's where the story ends. But for Kolfage, it was an opening. If the government wouldn't build the wall, he would. And that's the moment this stopped being a feel-good GoFundMe and turned into something darker. To pull it off, Kolfage brought in a partner whose name carried real political weight. Steve Bannon, former head of Breitbart News and the chief strategist to the President of the United States. Bannon took over as chairman of the group's advisory board. Around him gathered a roster of MAGA luminaries. Chris Kobach, the former Kansas Secretary of State, former Sheriff David Clark, and Blackwater founder Eric Prince. Overnight, a viral fundraiser run by a wounded veteran had become a serious operation with serious connections. Kobach even told the New York Times the group had the president's blessing, wrapping the whole venture in the aura of the White House itself. Together, they restructured everything into a private nonprofit, a 501c4 called We Build the Wall. Most GoFundMe donors transferred their money to the new group, and fresh donations followed. Nicole Keller, the Pennsylvania teacher, was one of the believers, at first. But more partners meant more mouths to feed, and that made Kolfage's original promise a problem. So here's the part you have to appreciate for its sheer nerve. He didn't quietly walk it back. He shouted it louder. He wrote a section on the campaign page addressing the allegations directly. How do you know this is not a scam? Telling donors to look up his history because I'm credible and a real person. Now he doubled down, publicly swearing he would not take a penny of compensation from these donations. Bannon, for his part, called it a volunteer organization. Every skeptic got the same disarming answer. The founders aren't making a dime. And for a while, they had the receipts to prove it. Because here's what set We Build the Wall apart from the average cause. They actually built something. They hired Fisher Industries, a contractor Trump himself had publicly pushed for the federal wall, and in May 2019, they broke ground on private land in Sunland Park, New Mexico. Kolfage triumphantly tweeted, "We made history, the first crowdsourced funded international border wall." Every photo of fresh steel became proof that the money was working, so the donations kept coming, on toward $25 million. There was just one wrinkle. Within days, city officials shut the site down. The barrier had no permits, and it exceeded the local height ordinance. Even US Customs and Border Protection distanced itself, saying it was not a partner on this project. 12. Kolfage's response: blame liberals trying to intimidate us. It was the same deflection he'd used his whole career, and it should have been a warning. To the hundreds of thousands who believed, everything still looked exactly as promised. A wounded hero, a powerful strategist, real steel in the ground, founders who swore they weren't earning a cent. By every visible measure, it was a success. But that word, visible, is doing an enormous amount of work. Because while donors admired the fence in the desert, something very different was happening to their money in the dark. The men who swore they wouldn't take a penny had, almost from day one, been quietly building a second structure no donor ever saw. One made not of steel, but of shell companies and fake invoices. So if Kolfage wasn't taking a salary, how did a triple amputee veteran suddenly afford a boat, a luxury SUV, and a life he'd never had before? And how long could a lie that big possibly stay buried? The answer is that Brian Kolfage had been lying from almost the very beginning. Prosecutors would later map the hidden machine in detail. Money from We Build the Wall flowed into Steve Bannon's nonprofit, Citizens of the American Republic, and into an anonymous shell company created by co-defendant Timothy Shea. From there, it went out to Kolfage, disguised as payments for social media pages, some of it routed to an account tied to his old site, Freedom Daily. Bannon's nonprofit even issued a fake 1099 claiming it had paid Kolfage's wife for media work. On paper, it all looked like legitimate business expenses. In reality, it was donor money flowing straight into Brian Kolfage's pocket, and it wasn't loose change. Kolfage covertly took more than $350,000 for himself, all while looking his followers in the eye and swearing he wasn't earning a cent. Then he lied again, this time to the government, reporting just over $63,000 of income on his 2019 taxes. When the investigation began, he even filed a false amended return. So what does a man who lost his legs for his country buy with money stolen from people who admired him for it? Boat payments, a luxury SUV, jewellery, cosmetic surgery, home renovations, a golf cart. He didn't even hide it. His Instagram was full of the beachside lifestyle, the high-priced boat, the big pool, captioned, 17 kids in our pool today. His wife posted the family's resort trips to Hawaii and a private charter flight to Nashville. Now remember the math from the beginning. Around $25 million raised, hundreds of thousands of people, and just under 5 miles of fence to show for it. That gap between what was given and what was built is where the lie lived. Plenty went to overhead, legal fights, and the partners around him, but the promise that 100% of every dollar would build the wall was never true. It couldn't have been. The founder was on the payroll the whole time, and the fence itself became an embarrassment. Engineers warned that one section built beside the Rio Grande could erode and topple into the river. Even Trump publicly disowned it, tweeting that the very small, tiny section of wall in a tricky area had been built to make me look bad. The wall his own supporters had bled savings to fund was now something the president wanted nothing to do with. For a while, though, the lie held. Who would dare accuse a decorated hero backed by a White House power broker? The federal government, as it turned out. In August 2020, prosecutors in the Southern District of New York arrested Kolfage, Bannon, publicist Andrew Badolato, and Shea for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. As prosecutor Alison Moe told the jury, all along, he and his partners were looking for an angle to take a cut. They figured out a way to secretly steal. But here is the most bitter turn, the part that still makes donors furious. Not everyone paid the same price. In his final hours in office, President Donald Trump pardoned Steve Bannon, sparing him a federal trial before it ever began, and Bannon's cut had been the biggest of all. His nonprofit took in more than $1 million. The man who took the most simply walked. Kolfage, the wounded veteran whose sacrifice made the whole thing believable, got no such rescue. In April 2022, Kolfage pleaded guilty, and in April 2023, US District Judge Annalisa Torres sentenced him to 51 months, more than 4 years, in prison, plus forfeiture and restitution. Badolato got 3 years. Shea was convicted at trial. Judge Torres's words cut to the heart of it. The fraud perpetrated by Mr. Kolfage and Mr. Badolato went well beyond ripping off individual donors. They hurt us all by eroding the public's faith in the political process. That's the real cost. Not the boat, not the SUV, not even the $350,000. It's Nicole Keller, the teacher who gave what she could, then testified, "I had felt maybe that I was getting scammed." She was right. Brian Kolfage survived a rocket that should have killed him. He rebuilt a life most people couldn't imagine surviving. He had genuine heroism, real public goodwill, and the trust of hundreds of thousands who wanted nothing more than to believe in him. So here's the question. Was Brian Kolfage always a conman waiting for his moment, or a real hero who let greed rewrite his legacy? And would you have spotted the lie, or would that vow have won you over too? Let me know in the comments. If this story gripped you, do us a favour, hit like and subscribe for more true stories of the schemes hiding behind the headlines. Because the most dangerous liars are almost never the ones who look the part.